Depression and anxiety. We have a negative emotion for each meridian and which Bach flower remedy we would use to counteract that emotion. And here's a little known fact about depression. Low blood sugar always leads to depression. If you could prevent low blood sugar, that alone would cure most of the depression. People get low blood sugar because they skipped a meal, they didn't eat, they got too busy, didn't eat when they should have eaten, and the blood sugar got too low at one time. And what's supposed to happen is the adrenal glands are supposed to kick in, secrete some adrenaline. The adrenaline converts glycogen into glucose. See, the body can store glycogen, but the body can't store glucose. The only glucose in your body is what's in the bloodstream at the time. The body cannot store glucose, but the adrenal glands can secrete adrenaline, which converts glycogen into glucose. And protein can be stored, and protein can be converted into sugar on demand. So if you ate frequent protein snacks throughout the day, that should prevent the blood sugar from getting too low at any one time. Later, when we get to the hypoglycemia, you're going to see on the hypoglycemic diet, which is on page 29, that there's protein spread out throughout the day. One of our best weapons to prevent the blood sugar from getting too low at any one time. We mentioned earlier that you can use the test cards, or you can use Ed Bullen's app for checking the Bach flower remedies, and you can pick up numerous emotional problems. It'll tell you which Bach flower remedy to use, and it'll tell you what emotion is associated with that. But the ones on page 16 is one for each meridian. When you test the color test cards, it's much more thorough than that. So the protein drinks can help prevent low blood sugar. We have a herb that's extremely successful called St. John's wort. And St. John's wort takes the place of the SSRI drugs. We don't like those tranquilizer drugs. They turn you into a zombie. They may calm down your anxiety, but you pay a heavy price for that. That you become non-responsive. If that's your method of calming down anxiety, you end up taking more and more and more of the drug that suppresses that. So we treat adrenals. This is so common. So Hans Selle, a medical doctor way back in the 1930s, developed something called the GAS test, General Adaptation Syndrome. He found the adrenal glands would try to compensate when the body is exposed to stress. And he divided it into 3 stages: the alarm stage, the adaptive stage, and the exhaustion stage. My contribution to this is I found 3 different muscles that go weak depending on which stage you're in. So stage number 1 is called the alarm stage. And there are 5 adrenal muscles: sartorius, gracilis, gastrocnemius, soleus, and posterior tibialis. Now, you don't have to test all 5 of those. Just, well, we test the sartorius. So, don't let me pull. Okay, she didn't show that. What that means is she's not in the alarm stage. That muscle is weak in the alarm stage. Sartorius, all 5 don't have to be weak, but the sartorius is the most reliable one. That muscle is weak in the alarm stage. So, she's not in the alarm stage. Now we're going to check for the adaptive stage. To do that, she must touch the posterior superior iliac spine, which is right there. Touch that. Palm up. And touch this one. It's the junction of the sacrum and innominate. And she has to touch it bilateral. And then you test the sartorius. And if she's in the adaptive stage, that will weaken. So she's not in the adaptive stage. Okay, what that leaves now is the exhaustion stage. Okay. Of all the 3 syndromes, the exhaustion stage is the most common. Most common of the 3. So there's a couple indicators for the exhaustion stage. This morning you saw me drop sugar on someone, and you saw me run the sugar down the stick. Sugar should weaken people. That would be a normal reaction. And in the exhaustion stage, sugar does not weaken them. So she just failed the adrenal test. Sugar should weaken them, and in the exhaustion stage, the body is so exhausted that now it's grabbing a hold of anything they can get a hold of to keep going. And one thing that grabs a hold of is sugar. Sugar should never strengthen you, it should weaken you. Okay, the point is, it fails to weaken her. So that's why we keep sugar in every treatment room, to test for that. Now, the exhaustion stage is also called reverse adrenal. Why is it called reverse adrenal? Because here's a strong muscle. She gets weak on natural things, and she gets strong on unnatural things. Orange shouldn't make you go weak, but it does. Any fruit, any piece of fruit will make you go weak if you're in the exhaustion stage of the adrenals. So that should not go weak. And the sugar should go weak, and it doesn't go weak. That's how you diagnose the 3rd stage of adrenal gland exhaustion. Either we don't keep fruit in every room, but we do keep sugar in every room for that purpose. This is because of the 3 syndromes, this is the most common one. Okay, so she's in the 3rd stage of adrenal gland exhaustion. That alone will give her depression and anxiety. Like earlier, I said, if you go too long without eating, the blood sugar drops down. Well, the adrenals are supposed to fix that. They secrete glycogen that's turned in sugar to bring up the sugar levels so you don't have low blood sugar. Well, in her case, she can't do that because her adrenals are too exhausted to secrete the glycogen to bring up the blood sugar. Her sugar just goes lower and lower and lower if she's gone too long without eating. makes her susceptible to depression and anxiety. When you treat the adrenals, like with a adrenal protomorphogen, standard process makes one called adrenotrophin. It works for about 5 minutes. Well, that's not very rewarding. 5 minutes only. So we experimented and we found out you had to give 4 different substances to make the adrenals work right. And the 4 different substances were put into, finally, we used to have to send the patient home with 4 different bottles. But now someone got smart and put all 4 ingredients in one tablet called GSC. Stands for General Stress Complex. General Stress Complex. Okay. So you say, well, does that help her? Well, the way you find out is go back to your first test. Now the sugar works like it's supposed to work. Do you follow that? See, here's our yardstick. Strong. This is supposed to go weak. Does not go weak. Give her the GSC, and now repeat the test, and it works like it's supposed to work. See, this should go weak, but it wouldn't go weak till we did this first. So the GSC is over there on the table. Extremely common. Extremely common. That's how you fix the adrenal glands. And then if you do frequent small snacks throughout the day, you prevent the adrenal glands to be called upon to try to fix that. If you do frequent small snacks throughout the day, then the blood sugar does not get too low at any one time. And now you've relieved the adrenals from being called upon, which that makes them exhausted when they're called on constantly to try to raise up the blood sugar. Now, the main weapon we have to take the place of Zoloft and those tranquilizing type drugs is the herb St. John's wort. So you can ask the body if she wants St. John's wort or not. So spread. And here's the St. John's wort. And that is a tincture and works 99% of the time. On rare occasions, we have to use another herb called kava kava, K-A-V-A, K-A-V-A, kava kava. Sometimes we mix it 50-50, half St. John's wort, half kava kava. You can ask the body what it prefers if you have those herbs in your office. St. John's wort is so wonderful because it relieves anxiety and depression with no side effects. Does not turn you into a zombie like the Zoloft or SSRI drugs do. There's a whole bunch of them out there. The Razapam, a lot of them end the word as PRAM. If you see that PRAM on the end of the word, you know it's a tranquilizer. I had a patient recently who he came in at the end of the day without an appointment and begged me to write a prescription for his tranquilizer because he didn't have an appointment with his regular doctor until 2 days later. But he felt so bad he couldn't wait 2 days later for his appointment. And he was an old-time patient who, although I hadn't seen him in a long time, but he'd been in earlier meetings several years ago. And I gave in, I wrote him a prescription for like 5 tablets only. Okay. He was so desperate, is a good word for his condition. He was so desperate. Okay, you can test for neurotransmitters. Those are the chemicals that operate your brain. There are 4 of them. There's lots of neurotransmitters, but the 4 main neurotransmitters that operate your brain are serotonin, dopamine, acetylcholine, and GABA. Those are the 4 main neurotransmitters. And you want those 4 to be balanced. And when there's a deficiency of those, 1 or more of those neurotransmitters, that's when the patient has the depression and anxiety, and they get prescribed the SSRI drug, and then it no longer works, and their solution is to prescribe a stronger dose, which further depletes the body's neurotransmitters. And so now they become addicted to the tranquilizing type drugs. So here's a muscle test to test for the 4 neurotransmitters. So this time you use the edge of the magnet, and it's associated with 4 different skull bones. And serotonin is the occiput. So I put the edge of the magnet on the occiput to test for serotonin. And then the frontal bone is dopamine. So we put the edge of the magnet on the frontal bone for dopamine. The temporal bone is GABA. So you put the edge of the magnet on the temporal bone for GABA, and the parietal bone, which is above the temporal bone, is acetylcholine. You put the edge of the magnet there. Now, for those 2, you need to do both sides. The parietal on both sides and the temporal bone on both sides. And now that I've told you all that, the next part is that rarely shows in the clear. You have to test it against something that's wrong. For example, let's see if we can do this scientifically. If I give her GSC, let's see what happens here. Okay, so that makes the adrenal muscle show up. If we put the GSC and the sugar on her at the same time. So what we're going to do now is we're going to put that in pause lock. So that weakness will stay as long as she stays in pause lock. Now we've got something entered on the computer, as opposed to testing her in the clear. Now we're going to check the 4 neurotransmitters. Okay, you have to understand strong means yes. Because this means that she's weak. So does dopamine show up? No, dopamine does not show up. Does serotonin show up? Yes, serotonin does show up. Does GABA show up? Does acetylcholine show up? So the only one that showed up was serotonin. Serotonin is a relaxer. If you want to increase the serotonin in your body, you tap bladder 1. So that's a good one to do before bed. That relaxes you, you'll sleep better. So just tap your own bladder 1, and that makes your body produce more serotonin. So, what are we going to do for her? We're going to have her eat frequent small meals of a protein nature. We're going to give her GSC, General Stress Complex. We can have her take St. John's wort, 10 drops, 3 times a day. Tryptophan is a precursor to serotonin. Tryptophan goes serotonin, and then from serotonin it goes to melatonin. And melatonin is the one that helps you sleep. The body will produce its own melatonin in darkness. So if you're having trouble sleeping, you want to sleep in a totally dark room. No lights, no night lights. You can put a night light in the bathroom, but don't put a night light in your bedroom. That'll interfere with your production of melatonin. So it goes tryptophan, serotonin, melatonin. That's the sequence. Frequent small meals, St. John's wort, GSC, protein drinks, you'll be cured. Okay? All right. Thanks for being so brave.
Thank you.
And when you fix the adrenals, she can also have fruit. Right now, fruit weakens her, but if you fix the adrenals, then the fruit will no longer weaken her.